So let it be written, so let it be done. This is Tabletop Terrors, and today we're going to talk to you about how to play your character, not your character sheet. When you're playing an RPG, you usually have a character sheet that lists what makes you different, what makes you special, what are you good at. And sometimes we can look at those things and treat it as a menu, and that can be limiting. And so today we're going to talk about how to kind of go off the menu a little bit and break off instead of just using what you're looking at and seeing it through a different lens. So Jeff is going to tell us a little bit about something we call the order of operations, and this hopefully can kind of get your thinking in a different place. So Jeff, tell me about the order of operations.
Yeah, so this is an issue that I think comes up a lot, especially with newer players, especially people coming from like board games and video games and stuff like that, where basically what ends up happening is they become so focused on what the game actions are that they don't think about what their character might actually do as a person in the scenario and kind of miss out on opportunities for cool and fun moments and cool things that they could do if they wanted to look. So the way that I like to run my games and the way that I recommend for people to try to approach the game, especially new players, but anybody who wants to play the game, I think can benefit from doing it this way, is instead of looking at the game actions that your character sheet says, like, oh, I can make an athletics check to do this, I can cast this spell, I can make an attack roll, so on. Instead, just look, what do I want to do as a character? And then I'll tell that to the GM, and the GM will tell me what I need to do mechanically to make that happen. So rather than saying, like, oh, I can attack, I can dodge, I can cast a spell, I can help, I can move, I can use a bonus action to hide, these things, those are all useful and there's nothing wrong with using those. They're there for a reason. Use them. But you might miss out on, opportunities for like creative moments where, maybe there's a crate of oil in the room and a torch, and someone says like, oh, can I take the torch and throw it in the barrel and, roll the barrel at them? Or, there's no rule in the game that says like, all right, here's your torch in the oil barrel roll skill. Like that's not a thing in the game, but it's still like a reasonable thing that somebody could try in the moment. So as a player, look for, I guess, to try to do it in that order rather than say like, here are my game actions, what can I use them for? Say, what do I want to do? And then the GM will negotiate which mechanics will do that. So maybe they will ask you then for your athletics roll that you have, or and so on. You say, oh, well, you kind of use this fighter skill, and we'll just sort of say that like we're going to use it for this, So you'll roll athletics with your bonus to that, whatever it is. But I think it opens up a lot more room for player creativity and player freedom just to be able to express to the GM, like, here's what I'd like to try. And then the GM will find ways for that to happen rather than being sort of bound to what your character sheet says that you can do as like game rule actions. Because I think you lose out on a lot of cool moments by sticking only to like, oh, I make an attack roll, oh, I cast a spell, and so on. So just all in all, as a player, ask first what you want to do as a character, and then let the GM tell you what to roll to do that, rather than look at what your character sheet says you can roll and then try to figure out what your character would do within that.
I think equally, the GM, in order for this type of thing to work and for players to do it, the GM should foster this. And so I had a little bit of a paradigm shift with role-playing games that I'm going to try to explain here, where if you think about it, the characters, the players are playing these characters in the world, and then they have mechanics that help them simulate some of the things the players can and can't do, for example. As GMs, often, when a player asks, hey, can I do this? We too quickly respond, yes, make this kind of roll. And I only say that because sometimes I think I lose sight of the fact that the player is playing their character even if they're not rolling dice. So if I say, okay, they've found a room, they found the bedroom of the person they're trying to get, whatever. They're searching around the room. I don't want this to be a roll and fail type thing. I want the players to go, okay, they say, well, do I find anything in this room? okay, well, there's a dresser in this room, there's a chest that's locked, and there is, something else I know about, maybe that they don't. There's a safe behind a painting, right? I don't tell them roll search. I go, okay, are you going to look in the dresser? Okay, you open the drawers and you see, oh, careful, there's a trap in here. Roll to disarm it. You know what I mean? Like, make sure that the story is happening and require the players ask questions and kind of tell you what their characters are doing, rather than that same thing. Make it a little less transactional about skill checks and results, and let those fade in the background a little bit. And I think you get a cool, it's kind of like the flow of the game changes a little bit, So again, all in all, like that, where as a player, if you're going, okay, what do I want to do? I'll let the GM translate that for me. As a GM, make sure that sometimes that translation is narrative, and that there are skill checks also, but that every time the players ask to do something isn't necessarily a roll, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think in the stories we've come to love, novels, TV, comics, like even video games and like cutscenes and things, we don't look at any other characters in terms of what their stats on a sheet are. Now, by nature of RPGs, we have to, because we're using rules to resolve these actions in the game. But I think that if you really look at the stories you love, you don't care from one minute to the next what someone's strength score is or those kinds of things. You just know if someone is great with a sword or if they're savvy, and just kind of play it like that. Because I've read some fantasy novels that will try to ape RPG mechanics, and it's very evident, because you're like, this feels weird. But in a show, and we use this show as a call out a lot, but in Avatar: The Last Airbender, there are these sort of power levels of what these benders can do, and it's not really defined. They can just do what they think of in the moment. But what's really important about that show is the character connections. The bending is really cool, but it's because it surrounds an awesome story. So think character first, and think, how would you act and then react, and then filter it through, like they're saying, these things on your character sheet. It's real easy to look at the character sheet and go, all right, so what do I want to do? This is your challenge. Don't look at your character sheet first. Imagine you are that character. What is your unique approach? How are you approaching this differently? Because you're not just a class. You're not like, well, I'm a ranger, so I got a range. That's not how, at least to me, the richest stories are going to be born. It's saying, I'm one with the wilderness. I cannot get lost in these woods. And so that now you're looking at it through that lens, where you're weaving in and out of trees and you're doing all these different things that aren't on your sheet, but feel a whole heck of a lot more like a ranger than just one spell. Those, to me, create those magic moments, and characters become living, breathing things. And then occasionally, boom, you hit it with that mechanic. But let that be the sort of sidecar that you drive with the motorcycle of your character. So
one last thing I'll say, following back up on sort of the GM side of things, because I think we kind of covered as a player, the way that you can go about these sorts of things. As James said, it's important to allow the players to do these sorts of things. But for some players, that might not be enough just on its own, because there are some players, and you probably already know who they would be in your games, who will ask you these kinds of questions just automatically. They're always sort of looking for that angle to play in the game. Like, oh, is there this in the room? Is there that in the room? Can I try this? And they'll sort of try to push those boundaries automatically, and they'll be fine as long as you just let them go. They'll go. But not everybody necessarily has that sort of inkling automatically. So as a GM, what I'd say, if you want your players just to start breaking away from just the straight mechanics of the game and try to be a little bit more creative and narrative with sort of the way they approach their actions, take care in certain scenes to give them very clear opportunities to do that. So rather than just all right, you've entered the room of the bandit's den, roll initiative. Okay, because then what's going to happen is they're going to be like, okay, I walk up to the bandits and I attack. And then it's just going to attack, and then the encounter will be over, and then that's the fight. And that's not the worst thing that can happen. Sometimes you just want a good, straight-up mechanical brawl. But sometimes you want a little bit more spice. So it can be a huge difference between You walk into the bandit's den, and there they are, roll initiative. And you walk into the bandit's den, you see a crate full of lanterns of oil off to one side, and you see that there's like a chandelier sort of thing that's lighting the cave from above, and you can see a rope that's holding it up. Because then the first thing that someone's going to ask, the second they take the very first turn, it's, can I cut the rope? Like, rather than anything else. So just the tiny bits of details that you can add into those scenes can really give players the jumping off pad to start thinking in that way. And then once you sort of give them a couple of times of doing that, then they'll probably start to look for those things on their own and start to ask those questions proactively. And then once everyone's doing that, then you're just rolling.
Yeah. So play a character, not a character sheet. What about you? In terms of like, have you ever done something that was not necessarily written on your character sheet, but felt right? And then, as a game master, what's the most creative thing you've seen a player do? Where you're like, yeah, I mean, that spell should do that, like, or anything of that like kind of caliber. But yeah, leave that in the comments. We'd love to hear about your games, your experiences. We're Tabletop Terrors. We absolutely love fun, creativity, and of course, tabletop games. If you love those things too, consider subscribing. We will end the video, as we often do, with a Tabtarian toast.
May you mend the first break.
May you kill the first snake.
May you conquer everything you undertake.
Sláinte.
Sláinte.
Oh, hello. I'm Tabletop Terry. The boys wanted me to come on here and tell you that for just $3 a month, you can support them on Patreon. You can get their games and their chunks and all these different things they release. I have no idea what I have to do with this, but Tabletop Terry here signing off. Thanks, everyone. At some point, you said Tabletop Terrors, and it just made me think of some guy named Tabletop Terry. That was like just a good brand crossover.
I am so excited about Tabletop Terry. Oh,
Because I realized I went back to I started writing down like notes of what not to forget, and there's just a quote that goes, "Hey guys, I'm Tabletop Terry."
Subscribe to